special Board of Education meeting in an open session workshop. And so, Jen, are we?
Yeah, sure, let's go for it.
Okay.
We're missing a couple board members. Should we just go for it?
Yeah, we're just going for
it.
it.
Just occurred to me.
Yeah.
We just had them
Yeah.
a moment ago. Okay. So every year at this time, I'm sure board members will recall that we have this organizational meeting, which is our chance to talk about what topics we want to prioritize. There are lots of things we can talk about every year, but how do we narrow that list so that we can have the most productive year possible, which is always a challenge. We use what comes out of this meeting is, you'll remember, to build out the calendar for the entire year, which we have to adjust, as we go through the year, but generally it provides the kind of scope and sequence for board meetings for that given school year. What I'd like to do with our time is to start with the review of possible goals in alignment with our new strategic framework, which you'll see up on the screen on page 1, as well as in your documents on page 1. These are some board goals that I also discussed with board officers in advance of this meeting. Get your feedback on them and finalize them. I want to take just a quick minute to remind everyone of the typical venues that we have available to us in order to reach those goals. And then I want to go over page 2, column by column, and talk about what topics we might actually tackle. I'll share with you our best thinking, which is all based on either things we have to do or things that we've heard from the board previously. We collect those topics along the way. And then obviously we're here to talk about them and either take things off or add things on and finalize what we think are the most important discussion items for the year. So that's the plan. Is that all right? Yeah, go ahead, Nikki.
I know the board contract of the EROs was up in October.
Yeah.
Is there a way we can move that to November? Or does it have to be heard in October? I'm worried about it affecting the election.
It's an excellent and important question. Can we hold on it, Nikki,
Yeah.
until we get into the meat? Okay, of the topic list. Certainly, the board is going to be taking up the ERO contract this year.
This school year.
This school year. Thank you, Mary. Since we're in the final year of the current contract, and timing for that will matter. I will. Knowing that we're going to come back to that, though, just a reminder, in this meeting, we don't generally talk about the timing of the topics. That happens through the work group chairs afterwards, and then we share that full draft calendar with the board, as well as board officers for finalization. So we will likely not get a lot into timing tonight. This is more about what we want to talk about, not when. So let's start with the goals. We've drafted 4 possible goals for the board, and these are meant to propose what could be the most important work that the board is best positioned to get done this year. The first goal that we proposed is really an engagement goal, to engage the community and potentially this future community coalition in developing strategies that support Black excellence. Our thinking is that the board needs to play a really important role in that dialogue around future strategy to support our third strategic goal around Black youth excelling in school. The second board goal that we're proposing is really a goal for the operations work group, and that is to create a sustainable employee compensation strategy. Like, if anything comes out of our operations this year that we've got to get done, we think that is probably the most important thing. The third is really probably a goal for the instructional work group, and that is to solidify and use a new decision-making process around scaling. current and emerging practices related to the framework priorities. We had a big discussion about scaling in the spring. How do we know when something is ready to take to scale? And we think there are a few things that are on the instructional agenda that are ripe for exactly that discussion. Pathways, as an example. The fourth major goal that we're putting out there for your consideration is around long-term planning. You'll recall that the new strategic framework has a whole section dedicated to long-term planning. We think this is a place where the board has to play a major role in thinking long-term, long-range facilities plan, community schools, early childhood. Where do we want to go in the future? So let me just pause there about the goals. Is this the work? Do these seem to you like the major goals that we should be setting for ourselves this year, related specifically to the board agenda? Any feedback? Yeah. Oh, Mary should probably call
Kate
people.
and then Gloria.
Yeah.
Turn your thing on. Sorry.
I think this is a good list. I was going to ask if we wanted to add something around climate, given the ad hoc work, and
Yes, it's a great idea.
some
Yes, I have, no.
changes in terms of school climate and safety and behavior.
I think that's a really good point, given that the ad hoc exists and there is a major product coming out of that that team that will flow into the full board. I think it would be worth adding. Any disagreement with that?
Is that where you were
Yeah,
going?
that's what I was
Great.
gonna-
Yeah, it's. I can't believe I missed that. Actually, I was a little embarrassed. Yes.
Do I wait for you or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Was thinking possibly on dress code. I know that there's a lot of talk on that, on whether or not we need to revamp it or not. Because I'm getting a lot of comments from young women saying
Oh, I have
that
gotten
they're
them too.
feeling that it discriminates against them.
The dress code is a portion of a component of the behavior education plan, so that will be, I think, included in this goal around climate, culture, and the behavior plan. So I think that is inclusive of that, Nikki. But I'm glad you mentioned it. Anything else about the goals that just seems missing or not quite right to you?
Dean?
Just some clarification around the third one,
Yep.
particularly around scaling current and emerging practices.
Yeah.
Related to the framework priorities. So
Yep.
that's all of them we're talking about. How many priorities? We got 5. How many major priorities were
It's a
there?
really good question. There are 3 priority areas in the framework. There's
Yeah.
a section, just to remind everybody, on deeper learning experiences for students. There's kind of a very targeted set of curriculum and instruction projects. The second goal is about building stronger relationships, so a lot about climate and culture.
Yeah.
And then the third goal is about options at the secondary level that lead to post-secondary success. I think what we're proposing is that among that list, because there are probably in total, I don't know, 9, 10,
Yeah.
projects, they're not all ripe for scaling though. Like there's a subset of those that are, and you'll see those on the list on the next page when we get there, that we think are ready to have a discussion about whether or not we want to expand. And those are the discussions we think are most important for the board to be having, because that's a pivotal decision, right? It's about investments, financial investments, opportunity costs. So that's what we're thinking. Is there's no way, we don't think you could agendize all 10 of those major projects and have it be manageable, but you certainly could zero in on the ones where we're getting near ready to make a decision about whether or not to expand or scale.
Yeah, there were certain things in the framework that certainly resonated with me probably more. I mean, everyone has their own thing that it
That's right.
resonates more with, but one that I think resonated with us, almost all of us, or at least I know several of us, was the empowerment of the staff and how are we going, and that, and I'm not sure where that was in here. If that's an instructional, if that's an emerging practice,
Yeah.
Around the SBLTs and the composition of that and how those are formed and then exactly what, how much authority they're given in the schools. I think related to climate issues, that's an important one that we heard some issues around throughout the year. So I don't know so I'm not sure exactly what an emerging practice is, but that's something that resonated with me that I want to hear about this year. And I think
Okay.
it's more than me too.
I want to come back to that, but
Okay, it's
Yeah.
Gloria and then TJ.
Jim, where does the advanced learning fit into this? I mean, I could see it under Black excellence, I could see it, where?
we're going to get into topics. We're kind of jumping to topics
Yeah,
a
we
little
are.
bit.
I wonder if it's
Yeah.
under the framework priorities.
It would be,
Okay.
yeah. There's a whole section about interventions, which include advanced learning interventions that are in the priorities. So it would be in number 3, if we felt like it was a topic that we were ready to consider taking to scale. It depends on what you mean by advanced learning. If you mean the OCR resolution, and I'll be prepared to talk about that on the second page, then I think that is not necessarily a discussion about scaling. I think that is a discussion that the board would prioritize possibly in the special meeting column as something you want to get an update on related to an OCR resolution, right? So I don't know if that's a strategy discussion or more of an accountability discussion. I think that's a little bit different.
TJ?
But I really want to stay on the big goals. What do we want to accomplish this year before we get into the nitty-gritty of specific topics?
I think a big goal area is, for me, and it resonates a little bit with the specifics that Dean identified, is the staff morale
Right.
issues. And that's part of climate perhaps, but
Mm-hmm.
also part of more than climate.
And what is the goal related to that, TJ?
The goal is to have a more professionally and personally satisfied, content, or not, maybe not. Those aren't quite the right words, but energized staff too.
Okay.
And I think that that you can see results through climate survey, through retention data, through transfer data. I mean, but I mean, I think that's. I think that's really, to me, that rises to the top at the goal level. And I understand that both the administration and the union put the SBLT work in the handbook. I can understand why it's there. I'm not sure it exclusively belongs in the handbook. I think that if we look at how if we look at the SIP processes and the roles of SBLTs, that perhaps that's certainly part of the morale stuff. It's part of larger issues too. And when we're talking about a streamlined SIP process and things, but that's getting into very specific things. And I think, but that does also touch on the morale issue.
Okay.
I mean, I think that in particular, I think the MTI proposals around SBLTs is very, very much around morale, at least partially. So we'll get to that when we talk about both the handbook and when we talk about specific topics. But
Yeah.
that, to me, that's how's our staff feel about their work and their climate and their jobs and their communities and their support. I mean, that's, to me, that's morale, and that's it's if the staff is scared, frustrated, unhappy, our students are not going to have good learning environments.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
that's the reality. So,
Yep. That's why we included it in the framework. It's a
yeah,
whole
yeah. So that's
huge commitment that we're making.
Yeah.
Now, because I want to move into the topic section, what I'm hearing for sure among the board is that we should add a specific board goal about accomplishing something related to the behavior ad hoc committee as it relates to improvements in school climate. I'm hearing an interest in the board talking about and supporting strategies to improve staff morale, which is related to the way SBLTs function and the SIP gets redeveloped and redesigned, which will be work that's laid out for this whole school year, which is going to happen. I mean, that's already on the work plan for this year. So it's more getting some input into that, some visibility into it. Does that sound fair? I just want to make sure I'm capturing that correctly. Okay.
Nikki, I'm just going to, before we move on,
Yeah.
I'd like to hear more about the first one, engage community and developing strategies that support Black excellence, because how does
Yeah.
that fit into our structure of meetings?
Well, if it's okay, I'd love to move to the next page because I think I can
Nikki
answer
had,
that question there.
Question.
Go ahead, Nikki.
Two things. One, I think you need a bigger goal in minority hiring. I think that's something I know Kate has talked about before, I know I've talked about before.
Yeah.
We need not just administrators, which is wonderful, but we need more minority teachers. And I think a goal on that would be incredibly admirable. Secondly, I would like a goal on special education and finance.
So, Nikki, I think one thing is we have the strategic framework that lays out all of our goals,
Yeah.
right? And we accepted or adopted that. So I think we have to, Jen, I think this has been a little confusing to people,
Yeah.
the major board goals,
Right.
because then it's easy to pull everything into it that we do believe very
Yeah.
strongly in and are important. So maybe maybe do you want to talk about what major board goals and how that differs from our strategic framework goals?
Yeah, I mean, I
Because
think
otherwise we put everything that's in the framework on it. We certainly as a board feel very strongly, and
Well, that's
then
why we put it in the
it's
framework,
Maybe,
right.
yeah.
I think what we've done the last couple of years is not a new process for us, although we only do it once a year. So it's, I think, easy to lose track of. The strategic framework, its goals, its metrics, its strategies. What we have done in the past is the board at the retreats, and we'll get into this on the next page, get sort of a comprehensive look at how progress is being made on all of it, right? Comprehensive look at both implementation and outcomes, which is important. You are the board and you need visibility into how we're doing on all of our strategies and all of our goals. During your meetings throughout the year, though, like all of the week-to-week meetings and month-to-month meetings, you have opportunities to talk about discrete topics, right? Not all of them, but one topic at a time. And we have to be discerning about what we prioritize in those meetings because you can't talk about it all. And the board's work is, I mean, the board has a unique role to play, which is different from the administrative team's work. And so we're trying to figure out what I mean by board goals for 18-19 is what specific, I mean, you're going to hold me, right, and the larger administrative team and the district accountable for everything that's in the framework. But what do you actively need to be involved in doing yourself, right? Because it is policy related, because it's budget related, because it is about long-term strategic thinking, right, which is the board's work. So we're trying to narrow in on what are the things that are most important that the board should be paying attention in the year ahead, which is a subset and a very strategic subset of the things that are in the larger strategic framework. So Nikki, back to your point about diversity hiring, it's already a metric and related to a goal in the strategic framework. There's already a strategy behind it. You guys will be holding us accountable for that, for sure. But what we're trying to figure out is what is the best use of your limited time in service of our larger goals and strategies. Let me flip to the next page, and that might help us finalize the goals. This is where we've laid out what you might discuss in each of these venues over the next year. And I've already seen some opportunities to tweak it based on what you've said so far. The regular board meeting, as a reminder, is the place where I give a superintendent's presentation every month to highlight district progress and mainly to celebrate our staff and our students. It's obviously the place where you mainly vote on consent items and other items, policies, decisions that have gone through the work groups. There are no major changes proposed to what we do in the regular board meetings for next year, other than for me to work on shortening the presentations that I do, because I know that they can go a little bit long sometimes. Yeah, go ahead, Gloria.
I know we just talked about behavior.
Yeah.
Are we going to include that under updates? We are going to give an update at every board meeting about our work.
Yeah. Yep.
Normally.
Absolutely. Any subcommittee does a regular update at every regular board meeting. That's just a standing item. You got it, Gloria. So does everybody understand Gloria's question? I think you probably do. The BEP ad hoc committee will have a standing agenda item on every regular board meeting. Any other questions about the regular board meeting, since this isn't changing dramatically? We talk about the things that flow through the work groups. Okay, let's go to instruction then. So in the instruction work group column, there are several plans, board-approved plans, that have to be reapproved by the board again this upcoming year. Summer school you do every year. The ELL plan is up in its 3-year cycle. We're going to do the evaluation this year. That will come to you later in the year, along with the refreshed ELL plan. Same with the tech plan. It's up for its 3-year renewal. So those are in that review cycles document. They're in the queue. This is the year that we do them. Under strategy updates, these 3 bullets are things that our team, the administrative team, heavily influenced by Lisa, who's the person who staffs instruction, these are the things that we think are ripe for a scaling discussion that are included in the list of strategic priority projects in the new strategic framework. So pathways, right? We will have completed our first year of pathways. And we need to talk about what we're thinking in terms of scaling. We think that there is a conversation that needs to be had about not just what is happening with the new Youth Reengagement Office, but innovative alternative options, where we are and what we might need to be scaling in the near future, and community schools. Remember, we've had 2 schools up and running for a couple of years, and we received a major grant that gives us the opportunity to scale if and when we want to, but we have to decide on where we're going with that and at what pace. So we put this on as things that we think are timely, important to discuss with the board as it relates to scaling. We've got a set of partnership agreements that are up based again on the review cycles document. These are all high-intensity partnerships that are in the queue with a 3-year evaluation, ready for renewal. Some of these will be lighter than others. We think Schools of Hope Middle, as an example, will likely be a place where you may see some pretty significant changes. We think there's some opportunities for improvement there, and I think our partners feel the same way. Behavioral health in schools is a place where we're all really eager to expand at a faster rate. So that might be a really interesting conversation for us. And then, of course, the BEP policy via the ad hoc committee on behavior will come through the instruction work group. So it'll have to be agendized there at some point. So let me just pause on instruction and let's talk about anything that might be missing that you would have expected to be on that list. And this might get us to the advanced learner discussion a little bit.
Dean and then TJ.
I'm sure we'll be getting the special ed report soon. So, but that's not on here anywhere. It should be on here somewhere.
The special ed report.
And, well, not only that, is that I would like to see an early report on how the initial allocations went.
Oh, yeah.
And then, I mean, we usually get that, but I just want to make sure that that's done again, because that's why the report, that's why we hired these people to help us with the allocation.
Yep.
And initially, when it all comes in, we think we got it, and then there's 5 more that you got to figure, and then we scramble for a while
Yeah.
until we get everybody hooked up.
Dean, I
So
actually
that
have
has
that
to
in
be early on,
operations.
somewhere in
Yeah.
here.
It's actually in operations. We just haven't gotten to
That's
that column yet.
operations?
Yeah, because it's informing budget decisions. Some
Well,
of
not
these
the
could,
special ed report, that's just allocation, but the special ed report,
that is all about allocation. That's why we hired them, Dean.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, well,
The consultant. Are you talking about our?
I'm sorry. Yeah, there are 2 things. That should certainly be in there. The student services people we hired to make the
ERS
allocation
group.
recommendations. But I think we're missing something on how we're delivering special ed services, not just allocation, but I think we need to hear more from John regularly as to what they're doing. And you know, we're going to hear an anecdote every once in a while that Jamie mentioned in this earlier meeting about they had a kid, had an IEP since kindergarten, and they threw it all out the window. The kid did great.
Yeah.
So, you know, you hear stuff like that every once in a while, and I know that the IEPs are there for a good reason, and people do excellent work developing them, and then the staff tries the best to implement them the way they can. And so I just.
So, look, can I ask you a
I think there's a
question,
lot of
Dan?
questions out there as to how this is actually delivered.
Yeah.
Especially when, what do we got? 6,000 kids with IEPs?
So I have a question for all of you related to Dean's comment. A year ago, if you look at the bottom of this page, it says annual written updates. And a year ago, we made a commitment that we were going to try our best to streamline the board agenda. And we tried some things. And one of the things that we tried to that end was, instead of every single year doing a special ed and an AL and an ELL update on the 3 major plans, that we would only put on the board agenda the plan that was up for renewal, and that there would be written updates on the other plans that were not up for renewal. I'm okay with, I mean, you guys, this is your agenda, this is your meeting. But I just want us to be consistent in whatever we decide. I mean, we could decide that for both AL and special ed, that even if they're in an off year, right, not up for a big renewal, that you still want to agendize an annual update and discussion to hear about what we're learning and how things are going. And I mean, these are all important topics. We have key constituent groups, as you are well aware of, who all want to see these topics on the board agenda every year. I'm okay with that. I mean, we can certainly make it happen.
Let me
but I would
finish
just
my
want to be
thought.
consistent.
Back to you.
Go ahead, Dan.
That's all right.
Because I do get that. I
It's
get those
what
questions too.
what I've always tried to wrap my head around is, I don't think any of us believe that it's simply a problem of correct allocation. It's also how we deliver this and where it works is certainly we want to know, and where it doesn't, we want to know even more. So I'm more concerned as to hearing what they're doing that's working.
Yeah.
That could be
Kind of
an
an update of
emerging
what we're
practice
learning.
that could scale.
Yep. Okay.
And if it's linked to allocation, cool. If it's not, if it's just a
Right.
delivery
Yeah.
method that is showing some success, let's hear that too, so we can perhaps scale that.
I totally get that, and I'm not opposed to it whatsoever. Lisa, Stephanie, you cool with that? Okay.
I too would like to hear it more frequently. Additionally, hearing all those parents speak really regardless of my view on the issue, which I think everyone knows, but also that these issues are ones that are time sensitive.
Yep.
And oftentimes they have deadlines and due dates, and if something isn't working, I'd rather know now than to scramble and say, oh, we didn't meet something.
Okay, so rather than belabor this, I mean, I would propose that we take the special ed plan update as well as the AL plan. I just feel like we've got to be consistent
Oh,
and move
absolutely.
them both up into the instruction work group calendar. As long as we know it's not the evaluation year, we're not going to have all the answers. It will be about emergent practice, what we're learning and figuring out, and how to build on that. I'm sorry.
TJ and then Kate.
Try and work from the top to the bottom.
Yeah.
I think with the ELL plan and the tech plan, we should plan on more than one work group meeting on each of them before it comes to the board for and perhaps some public engagement between the two. But that's
yeah.
But I guess that before it comes to the full board for approval and things like that, I think that to go from the evaluation to the presentation and initial discussion with the work group and things like that. So I think that that's kind of a scheduling thing
Okay.
with those. Summer school, I think that's good.
Okay.
On the other strategy updates, first off, just a reminder that when we talk about scaling, let's also make sure that we have on our agenda for the year what to back away from, what
Yeah.
to stop doing, the
Yeah.
opposite of scaling.
Mm-hmm.
That there's that what are we gonna stick a fork in? I mean, and I don't know where that whether that's part of budget or whether that's part of I think some of these things it's part of instruction
Mhm.
work group is to say, hey, look, we've been doing this.
Yeah.
We've been doing it either at scale or not at scale, and it's time to pull back. And it's time to is this a phase out? Is this a kill it dead this year?
Yeah.
So I mean, I really think that when we talk about scaling, that we have to have there's only so many hours in the day. There's only so many dollars in the budget. So the other side of that, on Pathways implementation, last I recall, there was some sort of consideration or vote scheduled for this fall, and I assume that's still there, but it's not there explicitly. So I guess that we may have to have a discussion. It's here as part of a discussion of a process, and so maybe we have to have a discussion about the process around Pathways. But I want to kind of keep that was how it was left last
Mhm.
week. Last we had it on an agenda.
That's true.
I think in this youth re-engagement, community schools, all good. Partnership agreements, whatever. I mean, we got to do them.
Gotta do them.
We got to do them. Maybe thinking of. I mean, I don't see any of these that jump out, except for perhaps the behavioral health in schools, in that it's going to mean. I've heard around this table many times that it is. There will come a point when we need to go from gradual expansion to rapid expansion,
I
and
think
if
that's the
that's going to be
discussion.
there again, I think this is the kind of thing that maybe would be 2 meetings, not one. If,
Yep,
if
could
we're
be.
talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't see here, one thing is just in the annual updates, whether it's on an agenda or not, the wellness policy and the wellness work. There's an annual report required in that, I believe, and I understand that's going to be till the end of that's going to be May, June or something, but that is.
I'll look into that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is something that's there. And finally, if I look at kind of the big things that have been kind of batted around this table and batted around in our community and just kind of floating around that's not addressed here, the advanced learning and the OCR resolution are clearly there, and obviously there's plans to talk about those later today tonight, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to bring that. But the other thing is that whether we want to call it MTSS, whether we want to call it interventions, whatever we want to call it, is that where we have grade by grade, concentrated in some demographic groups, but across the board, disturbing numbers of students who are, at least according to our assessments, but also according to our grades, struggling and failing. We're struggling and failing with these students. And what are we doing with that bottom 20%, that bottom 25%, that bottom 30%? Some sense of how what we're doing there, because talk about timing and urgency and things like that,
Yep.
you know, if you're not learning to read in second grade, and you're not learning to read in third grade, and you're not reading in fourth grade, it gets it gets harder. And I think that I don't know. It's
I understand.
instruction work groups is the
Issue.
right place for it. I don't know how to put it there. I mean, we can get the little triangle on the RTIL and things like that, and we can all sit around and talk about, you know, about Lexi and things. But I mean, I think we need to go deeper. And
We had it on the list, just so you know,
Yeah.
as we were drafting this. It's important to us too, and we decided to take it off. Certainly, we can reconsider that, mainly to give Lisa's team time to actually work on it. Like what we're worried about is we're going to prepare some big presentation that actually means we're not actually working on the problem. And so it's just a matter of a timing issue for us. I mean, the team that does the work has to have time to do the work in order to be prepared to have a good, solid, meaty discussion with the board, especially if we think there are policy or investment decisions or places where we need the board to help us get something done. And we're just not at that point yet, TJ.
I think that's,
Yeah.
well, I just want to say that I think some of this could go in the scaling discussions. Some
could.
of that, some of that
Mhm.
at least.
Okay.
Maybe we need a
Duly
plan to get
noted.
to that point by next May or something.
Yeah.
We can do that.
I think what we want to do is maybe just keep an eye on it, and but we do think there'll be a time and a place where that discussion needs to happen.
I keep looking over at Lisa too. I don't have to turn around to do
It's
it.
about timing.
Yeah, and I know that the CNI person is doing intervention walkthroughs at all the schools right now,
Yes.
gathering information to inform next steps in terms of professional development support and materials, so we wanna, it's the most we've done actually in a really long time, so
Yeah.
we wanna have something good to
Yeah,
share.
something substantial.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I do hear it though. Okay.
So I guess
And as
that-
far as the AL plan, I think I already proposed we're going to move it up to instruction. That would be inclusive of an update on the OCR resolution, right? That's part of it. We just put it on
And then I
instruction.
guess the last thing is the middle school work.
Yeah, we took that off too. We were trying hard to
I guess
streamline.
that, you know, one of the things that and the middle school and even the high school work, because I hear things like, well, you know, everybody knows we're going to be at block schedules in 2 years, and I'm like, I didn't know that. And so, I mean, I think the transparency around both the middle school and the high school work is,
It's like a scaling
I mean, you
thing.
know, I don't know how we can. The one way to get transparency is having this agenda item. That creates transparency. So yeah, I mean, I'm interested to hear about how we're going to all be block schedules, and I think that goes to kindergarten too, apparently. So.
I don't know
yeah.
anything about that.
Yeah.
And I will add that to the list of things that, if the timing is right and if we can get there and have a substantial, deep and important conversation with the board, we certainly will agendize it.
So,
Oh.
you know, just, I mean, you know, I'm glad we're gonna bring up the advanced learning to instruction.
Good.
And I think that's important because of the Black excellence, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
is,
It's part of
I mean, it's aligned. I mean, and the IEP, I mean, we just got done with our behavior ad hoc committee, and it's aligned.
Yeah.
And that's what we spent a lot of time on. So
Yeah.
I think it relates to our framework and our strategies to be able to, not that, you know, for us to hear that, because we're gonna be having
I love
these
that.
conversations. So.
I think that's a really good point. Yep. Agreed. Mm-hmm.
So I think we pulled up, we have ELL, special ed, and advanced learning, right,
Mhm.
on the agenda. I might add the at-risk. I mean, if you just think about I know, but the large cohorts of students, those are the 4 large cohorts of students we have as a district,
Mhm.
from a plan perspective. So it fits in with some of the alternative programs that
think
we've
it will.
started to explore, some of which
Mhm.
may land on the scaling conversation. So I don't want to lose sight of the alternative piece. So, and
Mhm.
in fairness, a number of these bullets are directly related, so there may be just a way to fit them together and speak to some of that risk plan and alternative programming.
Okay.
Which is I think a lot of the content's already here. It's just kind of a little bit more holistic look at how we
Okay,
think about
I get it.
alternatives. That was one.
Mhm.
And then the other is around the middle school, et cetera. I mean, that could also be a written update.
I know
If
it could,
so.
right. And I think we'll always provide written updates on things as appropriate and needed if we can't quite find room on the board agenda together. So I think that's a really good point. Okay, I think we've filled the instruction work group. Can we call it filled?
I started writing down
Yeah, exactly. You're going to help me with this, Kate.
One quick question.
Yeah.
My only thing in middle school, whether it be written or oral,
Yeah.
is that we were starting to work out games so that we wouldn't have such behavioral issues in middle school, and I don't want to lose that progress that we did make on it,
Yeah.
because we did make some.
Thank you, Nikki. Okay, so let's shift to operations. On operations, we have, of course, a major agenda item ongoing related to budgets. Last year, we tried something for the first time where we built in a couple of kind of early discussions before the budget formally kicked off in January. I think those served us really well. The class size policy was an example of that work last year. And so for this year, we're proposing 2 early discussion items. One, which Dean already mentioned, which is about allocation of student services resources inclusive of BEP resources. The second would be an early discussion on compensation strategy. So that's our thinking on budget. Otherwise, budget, I mean, generally would follow our typical January to June regular item on the agenda. We have the Nuestro Mundo Charter renewal this year, which we're required to do. We want to take on the long-range facilities plan as a recurring item as well on the operations work group agenda, meaning more than once. Every year we have to do employee handbook. And then we have the policy suites. Policy 8000s we're actually doing tonight. So it's sort of a hangover from last school year. Non-discrimination I thought we took off. So that's just, you can scratch that second bullet. The policy 7000 suite, which is the community relations suite, is the big policy suite we're going to take up in this upcoming school year. So is there anything that seems missing or not quite right on that list?
Kate and then Dean.
So, I mean, I'm good with this list. Maybe just for the benefit of the full board, one of the things that Kelly and I had spoken about was just timing a little bit.
Yeah.
So you kind of alluded to it around bringing up staffing and compensation strategy. I feel really strongly that we don't get to February locked into allocations and not have a lot of flexibility around
Yep.
some of the other pieces of the budget. And so I'm hoping to have a good dialogue with some information early around allocations. I think this report will feed into some of that dialogue.
Yep.
So that we can all kind of know the big choices that we have to make around the number of staff and then the compensation for our employees is really, really important. So just maybe so that everybody hears that.
Great.
Dean?
Yeah, I really think this year we should get a good briefing on MSCR stuff. Have him come here and explain. He's been there a year as a new, new leadership, and it's like something we always say, oh yeah, then we got MSCR too, and we never really,
I know.
It does extraordinary work and with many of our
It is
students.
true, Dean.
And even people that are willing to bet that people that do MSCR programming doesn't even know the school district's running it.
It's a really good point, and we've tried to put it on the regular board meeting agenda in one of my updates, and too often it's gotten kicked for another topic. I hate to say it that way. It's just gotten moved,
We should not do that.
deprioritized.
This is it's $15 million a year.
It's huge,
People
yeah.
use it. 85% of all the children that use MSCR activities are kids of color.
Yeah, yeah.
It's in linking it to the goal
That
of black excellence. We've got an opportunity to engage these youth all day over there, and when board hardly knows anything what they do.
I think operations would be a great place for it.
Somehow, we should get
Okay.
a good briefing on it. It won't take long. I don't
Okay, sounds good. It sounds like there's a lot of energy around that. Okay. Okay.
I counted
And I
up the
think we should have
months
them
on
on the
your, I think
pontoon
you
boat.
can handle it. Kate.
That's what we should do. Well, let's have that meeting on the MSCR pontoon boat.
Well, there we go. There
Didn't
we
even know
go.
we had one of them, did you?
We own that.
Yeah, we got a pontoon boat, yeah.
Anything else on operations work group? I think that's pretty full too, but yeah.
I want to emphasize what Kate was saying and that sort of said earlier is that I really think that we have to go through the handbook process and through board processes, the compensation piece, we have to get it in place.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to get, and it's not, and as we saw last year, that it's not something that's going to be simple. And so I think that the earlier we can start doing that, the better.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the OWG, we have some 1000s policies that we
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
get back to.
Yep, that's right. The board
And,
policy suite.
And you know, some of those, and I think that recently we've seen some issues around how our advisories work and how most works and things like that have come up. Those are part of the 1000s, or could be part of the 1000s. There was a discussion of doing what, you know, ideas around 7 versus 9 board members. There were a few things that just kind of got, we were in the middle of budget season, and the answer was, let's pass the 1000s that are clean,
Mm-hmm.
and let's come back on this other stuff. So we haven't come back to that. So
Okay.
so I think that's kind of
There's a short list of a
Yeah,
few
so it's not-
policies.
It's a
Yeah.
short but difficult list. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's why we came back. That's why we pushed it aside, is because it was difficult. But I do think we need to come back to it, because or else it'll be how many, 5 or 6 years.
What do you think, Matt? Should we go for it? No, I actually don't mean for you to answer that question. Yes, we should.
But I think that's important.
The thousands.
7 members.
Well, that's-
Should we
that's-
pass
Well, you
it?
had a strong opinion on it, Nikki. I don't think it was decided, though. Okay, so we'll look at the thousands with Kate to see where and how we might agendize those few remaining policies that we wanted to circle back to. Okay. Can I ask a question, one last one on operations, as long as we're still here, and specifically talking about policy updates? In parens, it says via committee, question mark. Last year, we also tried something new, which was to have a 2-person, kind of not a committee exactly, it was more of like a policy review team. Extra help. Take a pre-look and deep look at the policy suites that were up for review, to help Matt prepare recommendations for the board. And I just wanted to see if there were any views on whether or not we should keep going with that approach, any changes you'd like to make to that approach. Should we continue it, not continue it? Any thoughts on that?
Dean?
Well, I liked it, but I also think it happened that we had 2 people that really like doing that kind of stuff on the board. And so I mean, maybe they'll agree to do it again, which would be cool. But I don't know if that's sustainable. You might get 7 people like me going, no, man, just bring it here and I'll deal with it
Depends
at
on
the meeting, you know.
the group.
But it was kind
Yeah.
of, so I think we could take advantage of that if these 2 want to continue, but I won't.
Yeah, I concur with Dean. I think it worked really well. I think we spent a lot less time in our work group meetings on just wordsmithing policies. Very important work, but it does take away from the time that is, and I think that it isn't a committee. It's not it's not like it's all getting their approval and coming. I don't think it has, it comes to the board with a lot of, I think, some of that wordsmithing already vetted in a way. And so I applaud TJ and Kate for the time they put into it. I think it helped us be more effective in our work group meetings.
Yeah. So I move that we make them do it again.
I don't think that's a voting item, Dean.
Yeah.
I think we
Hey,
probably have
There's 5
more
of us, we
votes
can
for
all,
that.
yeah, we can win this one.
TJ?
I guess I see Matt smiling and nodding, so part of it is that is this working for Matt is the question. If it's working for Matt, then I'm glad to continue. I also might suggest that with Kate being the chair of the operations work group, that Nikki do be part of the review instead or in addition or something.
I'd be glad to.
But that's just a suggestion, and I think as
Let's back up.
yeah, so we can put that out there. So.
Totally.
I'd be glad to if people don't mind.
All
You
right.
No, it's up to you, man.
I think what is important, I think one, and I'll just voice this, is I think one thing, I felt really comfortable with TJ and Kate because I think that you guys disagree on enough items that it wasn't, that they weren't coming with a bias. And I think that
Working
is
balance.
important, and I think if it's Nikki and TJ, I think it's really important that it's not coming to the board with an inherent bias
It's an
on
excellent
policy versus,
If I look at something legally, I go in with absolutely no bias whatsoever. If I look
Nice.
at something personally, I go in with a bias.
Hmm.
And so if I can focus on the legal matter, that there's not going to be a bias.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think we're going to stick with the policy team. If we can move over to the quarterly retreats then. They're not actually quarterly. I got to change that. They used to be quarterly several years
Okay.
ago, but we now do them 3 times a year, fall, mid-year, end of year. We would like to continue to use those retreats to take a holistic look at implementation of the strategic framework, in this case, our new strategic framework, which would include our thoughts on how to empower school communities, the SIP redesign, how SBLTs should function differently, right? That would be inclusive of those strategies. And we thought it would actually be a great venue to get updates on what's happening with the coalition to support us with strategies that support Black excellence. And yeah, I mean, I don't know yet exactly what that looks like, but I'm getting back to your question finally, Mary. I think that the retreat lends itself, just because of the time and space that we have, the environment, to go deep into thinking about our, not only our strategies that are already articulated in the framework, but emerging strategies from our community that would support our goal around Black excellence. That would be the ideal spot. So any thoughts on retreats and retreat focus? I think this is where the SIP SBLT update and discussion for sure would happen at the retreats.
Jen, I think having these items is a really good idea. I would
Good.
like to see it really focused on the
Yeah.
work. We adopted the new
Yeah.
framework. I really think that we just have to work it.
Me too.
Like and we have to be on top of it.
Mhm.
And I think that a tighter focus on implementation of that, I
work.
think is a good idea.
Okay, love it.
TJ?
Not necessarily the retreats, but I'm kind of hitting the leftovers. There's, I can't remember how many, but there's some strategic framework metrics that are still kind of
Yep.
works in progress.
Yep.
And so I think that before the year is out, that those should be finalized. And I don't know whether that's operations work group, whether that's special meetings, whether that's retreats.
Yeah.
But again, I don't remember how many there are, but I do think that we should finalize those.
Our
And-
goal, TJ, was that we would finalize them at the fall retreat this year. But we know ourselves well enough to know we might have to add some other meeting after that to take a second look or
And I
something.
think,
So I think
mean,
that's right.
you know, some of the ones, the growth measure and things like that have some complexities to them, but I also
Yeah.
think that there's some real, I don't think there's any really good choices for the measures for 4K through first grade academics.
Yeah.
But I think that we have to, I mean, I think we have to be really careful about the less bad measure we pick.
Mhm.
So I do want to, I want to make sure that we're aware of the limitations of whatever we choose in that area, because whatever we choose is going to have to be very limited, because it's 4-year-olds.
I'll make
We're-
sure.
We're
Yeah.
measuring academics. It's like, they're pretty limited.
Yeah.
So
So-
anyway, that's just a thought.
We'll make sure to articulate the goals, metrics, measures, finalization in this document somehow. Okay.
Okay.
I'm good with the retreat topics.
Okay.
I just wanted to throw out there, we may need a valve for more time for some of the major goals.
Yeah.
I can imagine the outcome of the ad hoc being something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Same thing around compensation structure. So there's just, for those, we might want to flex a little bit into
Yep.
those goals.
So I think now that we've had our discussion, going back to those major board goals, the adjustments that we said we wanted to make around climate and culture,
That makes more sense.
it's the right one. I think it lines up really nicely to what's inside of this document. And holding on to as our first major goal, our work around Black excellence. Again, I think your point, Gloria, like not only will our retreat work link back to that critical commitment and goal, but I would hope what we're doing in the instruction operation work group, almost every topic has a clear and important connection. So I'll just name that. I think that was a really important point, Gloria.
So, just on the retreat part,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's an opportunity somewhere, during the retreats to talk about sort of emerging issues, like, what's the future, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what is happening? I mean, I think about, you know, I'm glad we're focusing on Black excellence, but I think about our Latino community and our students and integration and how we have generations of children or generations who are in our schools. Is there an opportunity to have a discussion about that?
Right.
Whether it be that or is it something else, right? I mean, I think, you know, oftentimes we're always responding and reacting. And is there an opportunity to sort of look futuristic on what is to come and how do we prepare ourselves?
That's a really interesting question. I think that's a great retreat type topic, right? This kind of forward looking, what's happening in our community, what do we need to be keeping our eyes on. I love to think about that, Gloria, and how it could serve us well through the retreat without adding more topics, but more as
Right.
context for the discussions that we're having. Okay, excellent. I think I have what I need so that I can finalize this. As a reminder, process-wise, we then bring this to the two chairs of instruction operations and then board officers before we finalize not only the topics, but how they lay out in the full year-long board calendar. Thank you. I really appreciate your input and guidance. I think it's going to be a really good, meaty school year. We're going to get a lot accomplished together.
Yep.
All
Okay.
right.
Then we are on to our second item on the agenda for the meeting, which is the handbook revisions. Input on handbook revisions for 2019-20.
All right. I think Heidi is going to join us for this.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Heidi. Oh, Deirdre. All right.
I know I dropped my pen. So, for those of you where this is new to you, annually we review the employee handbook. And as part of that process, we have subcommittees that are composed of district and employee representatives that meet on a variety of topics that, you know, may or may not result in recommended changes to the handbook, and whatever the subcommittees kind of agree on, that goes to what is an overall handbook review committee, which is a larger committee that's composed of district employee representatives. And whatever that committee then comes to consensus on, we bring those to the superintendent then to bring to the board for making determinations on handbook revisions. As part of the process, we've already met with the employee groups, and I outlined for you in the memo some of the areas that have been agreed on between us that we want to talk about, which includes school climate and school-based leadership teams, planning time, high school scheduling, extracurricular pay, since that schedule has not been reviewed in many, many years.
Yeah.
The compensation plan, and that committee is going to continue its ongoing work. And then we have a bunch of what I'm going to call ongoing groups that are all, you know, meet all the time, which would be, we have one on special ed, subs, school calendar, and the support units. So those are groups that meet ongoing. There's not specific issues that have been identified that they're looking to change in the handbook, but since we meet on a regular basis, things could come up that would then come to you as issues that, you know, might result in some changes to the handbook. So those are what the employee groups have identified as areas that they want to talk about, but then we come to you as a board and say, are there other topics that you're aware of that you would like us also to address? So we're here before you now to find out if there are other topics that you think we should be addressing with our groups as well. Nikki?
I think on licensure, I brought this up on ABCD before, about whether or not we're creating a separate standard on licensing from programs that require student teaching to a program that doesn't require student teaching with license looks identical. Are we going to give preference to the one that requires student teaching? Are we going to do preference to the other one that doesn't? I don't think we even have a.
Yeah, that's not
That's
really a
not
handbook
something
issue.
that's
Yeah.
a handbook issue. It's not something that is addressed in the handbook at all. That would be
Mhm.
more of a hiring preferences.
Yeah, and I know when we talked about it last time, Nikki, it was, I mean, things had just changed
Yeah.
at the state level, and I think even DPI is still getting their heads around how licensure, you know, with all the new licensing rules, how that works. But it wouldn't be a handbook committee issue. But we certainly owe you our thoughts on that, so we won't lose it. Teacher?
It looks like Heidi has another answer to Nikki. Do you?
Right, I just
before
didn't
ask you
know,
the question?
I was asking
No, she
Deirdre
was
if
just
she had been
asking-
aware that there was a licensing
Yeah, I
issue
mean,
that
I
we
thi-
were,
I think it's just-
something we were supposedly looking into,
Yeah.
because this was the first time.
That's all right. We'll follow up on it,
Yeah.
Nikki.
I think when we talk, some of that
Yeah.
might come back with the 8,000s tonight too, actually.
Okay.
There's a piece there. This is a vague memory, and I don't remember, but was there an issue around defining workloads for high school teachers that was still up in the air, and had that been resolved?
No, that would be the planning time.
Okay, but there's none about like the 25 Carnegie units and that the 25 hours and that stuff has that all been resolved?
I mean, that, there has been no
Changes?
changes. I mean,
Okay.
but it's a topic that we're going to continue to discuss.
Okay.
But as we explore, I mean, first off, we don't know if there will be any change to high school scheduling.
Right.
If there is, obviously that would impact what planning time looks like if it looks different than it looks now. So that, I mean, that's all
And it
part
would
of
also-
one big discussion that, you know, we would be having.
I guess the other piece that will impact is what a full teaching load looks like. And that's, I guess that's what I'm getting is how do we define a full teaching load and what calls for an extra compensation and
Right,
things like
and
that.
so the handbook already defines what a full teaching load
Right.
looks like and when we require an overload to be paid. In our discussions that we've had with MTI, that has never really been the concern. It's more along what does planning time and devoted individual planning time look like within those confines?
I guess I want to flag the other piece of it.
Yep.
And
I think that other piece
I
then-
knew the one was planned, the planning time one has already been flagged
Yep.
at both middle school and high school. I think that the defining a full teaching load issue is more relevant in high school than middle school, but could change if we change middle school schedules. So
Correct.
the other thing is that there's not a lot of clarity around the use of improvement plans in the handbook at this time for individual staff members at any level.
Mhm.
There's some, but there's not a lot. And so I guess that I'd like to see that spelled out more, or at least a discussion of whether it should be spelled out more. I mean, I think that's the board at this point is what we're doing is we're asking this process to consider these things and not necessarily come, you know, say, hey, we discussed it and we're happy with where it's at. That's legitimate, but so I think that the use of the improvement plans as a, you know, part of educator effectiveness, as a part of hiring and retention and non-retention issues and things like that, but just more clarity around that is I'd like to put that on the table.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, I was just going to ask about the timeline.
For when we would be bringing the recommendations to the board. Our goal is by late fall.
Okay.
Which is important given the
Given
conversation.
It's very-
the-
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially around conversation.
Is my
yeah.
memory correct that last year we did did we split it at all, or did we punt it?
I think we punted.
Yeah,
Okay.
we gave an update.
Okay.
And then
That sounds more
we do it
accurate,
till
okay.
spring.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, we just weren't ready yet.
Yeah.
The committee wasn't ready.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But we're well aware of the time
Urgency.
constraints and how they impact
Yes.
budget and those items that have to come to you.
Great.
for that.
Yeah,
Great.
you could pull them apart if
Exactly.
needed. Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
So compensation, would compensation include health insurance?
At this time, I don't believe there has. They're looking at health insurance. I mean, there's
You could.
changes, but I mean,
I just think that when we look at compensation, I wouldn't want to have it off the table, that might be part of it. It's a big part of basically compensation right now for us.
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing that up, Mary, because I think coming out of the budget process last year, our assumption would be that we would be looking heavily at salaries, but that it would be inclusive of the total compensation plan. So,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so maybe just to comment on that, I would love to approach our discussion here,
Yeah.
and I don't know exactly how that translates into the handbook discussion with kind of 4 pieces always around, but the 4 big pieces. So, salary, steps and lanes, healthcare, and then the allocations are they're the 4 big pieces of our budget. And so while we may have discrete discussions about one piece of it, looking at it all always together, I think will help us instead of making choices in isolation. So I don't know how that translates for you guys, but I think it would help us be able to.
I would say that the team is currently looking at salary, step lane, and health insurance as possibilities. There's been a primary focus on salary, step, and lane specifically, but there is an understanding that all 3 of those things are very closely aligned. That group didn't have the charge on allocation, but those 3 things are really very closely aligned, and they understand that investments in some could and do affect investments in others. So it is something that is on the table, although they haven't spent a lot of time focusing in on the health insurance, but they do know that's a possibility.
Thank you for raising it, Mary.
Okay, well, if there are there any other topics? discussion items? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, that was our last agenda item, and so I will move for adjournment.
Second.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
All right. Yeah, I have,
just available for questions, but Matt will help kick this off.
So
yeah, do you guys want to join Matt? Thank you.
in terms of just how we were thinking about running this meeting, given that it's a little bit different, I think Matt's going to give just a little bit of context around what these policies are and what the some of the updates were, and then I was going to try to run this almost like consent by page. So if you have comments on something, pull it and we'll discuss it. But otherwise, we're going to assume that the full board is good with the changes as proposed. So just keep that in the back of your mind. And do you want to give some context? At this step in the process, we will have another opportunity in the full board meeting to review and vote.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as you look through the 8000s, there's really 4 categories of changes. One of those categories is updating of titles and references to staff versus solely teachers. A lot of the policies just reference teachers, and that was changed to staff in a number of policies. The second category of changes are updating policies to eliminate references to collective bargaining other than base wages. We all know why that is. The third category is we just had a discussion about employee handbook, and because of the employee handbook, there's a number of policies that are proposed to be deleted because they're unnecessary, because those provisions are now in our employee handbook. And then finally, there's a smaller group of policies that have some what I believe to be fairly minor revisions just to add clarity to the particular policy. So those are really the 4 buckets of policy changes that you'll see, and I'll turn it over to Kate to go through those based upon the grid.
So does everybody have the grid that's in the board docs for today? So maybe if we just start with the first page, 8000 through 8031. Does anyone want to pull any of those to discuss? TJ.
It's not really actually any particular policy, or it's kind of a big issue that's touched on in 3 or 4 policies.
Do you want to do it first or last?
It has to do with, and there's kind of no resolution here. It's directly about, in some ways, about 8200, but it also touches on 8011, 8041, 8042, and the question is about when someone is hired and how this goes in terms of how we treat the human resources report, how we do the board approvals, the vote around that, and what that process is like. You can read these, there's not a lot of clarity in these policies about how that works. And so,
why don't we
the
do
one,
it?
yeah, I mean, but those are the ones I can tell you where it has where it interacts with those.
Yep.
Maybe only 8200 is the one that only one that needs to be addressed
Let's do it
directly,
then.
but it does touch on the other
Yeah,
ones. So
I think we'll
that's-
probably talk about
yeah.
8200, so let's do it then.
That would be it. And then
I'd like to do 8121, discussing a substitute teacher license system.
I was going to do it page by page, but we can move to the next page if there's nothing else on the first page. So 8041 through 8221. So I've got 8121 to pull and 8200 to pull. All right, let's move to the next page. Great. Anything else on that page?
8254A, because I have a question.
Next page, 8350 to 8483. And then the last page, 8701 through 8900. All right, we just took 40 to 4, so let's. Matt's got a smile on his face. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go back to the top and start with 8121, which is substitute teachers. think that was you, Nikki.
I just had a quick question. Understanding how the student teacher, that student teacher should be the same as substitute teacher. Just want to know, is this all covered by the employee handbook or is it a separate issue? That was the other question.
Student teachers aren't allowed to be substitute teachers when they're student teaching, which is why there's those changes have been proposed.
Okay, that's all I needed to know.
Okay. Great. All right, so you want to move on to 8200? Do you want to start with that one, TJ?
Yeah, I guess that I believe that state statutes almost require or make it very difficult for the board to delegate the process of hiring, which means that at some point that a board approval is required before someone is considered hired by our district. If we look at our human resources report, often people begin working in our district in September and they don't come before the board to be hired until March, which means that they've been working for the district for 6-7 months without, in my mind, being hired. But I also think that there's also some clarity needed that what is the power of the board here, you know, I certainly don't believe that the board should be on a regular basis micromanaging hiring decisions, but I do think that it's important to retain the a veto power over the recommendations of the administration around hiring, and one that on a functional one. So I would like to have clarity on how that functions within our policies and our practices too, policies and practices. And you know, I don't, you know, just because you want to retain a power doesn't mean you want to exercise it, but you do want, but
Sure.
I do think that it's necessary to retain it.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this timing issue because it is
Yeah.
a concern. And Deirdre, do you want to share a little bit about what you guys are thinking about in terms of addressing the timing issue?
Yeah, so first of all, TJ, we agree with you. Our team has been looking at this, and there have been a couple of questions that have come up over this last school year around why is it that we have the report set up the way that it is. It is something that's gone back years, and it is just that's the way that we've always done it, right? So, so as we started digging into this, one of the bigger issues that came up specific to why people are showing up on that report after the fact was specific to licensing and certification and DPI and when they're giving us the notification that this person has their license, et cetera. So our team, and however the process was laid out, we're not really sure, but they were trained at some point to wait until we actually got that confirmation around their licensure before they would put them on the agenda. So we have made a tweak to the report where we will go ahead, once the person is set up in Munis, which means they are an employee here, they will go on the transaction report for the board as close to the moment that they were hired as we possibly can get them. Now, we know if somebody comes on at the end of the month, they're not going to be approved exactly within the month that they've been approved, but at least it will kind of stop the challenge that you guys are seeing folks showing up on the transaction report months after they have been hired. The addition to that, because we know that this came up in the policy 8500, I believe it is, where the board is interested in understanding if we are hiring those folks, like where are they in their licensing and certification, right? So within our report, there will be very specific columns that will let you know this person has been hired. They're pending the licensing notification from DPI. We'll also have on there folks that are that have license with stipulations, et cetera. So that will be clear when they show up on the report.
Okay, so Matt, does that mean that we have to go back and change the language in 8001, where it says that no employee shall be, no payment shall be made to an employee who has a proper certificate or license recorded unless the State Department of Public Instruction authorizes action to the contrary? So do we have to change that in light of in this change? it's a set of dominoes, but
right.
I mean, I don't need to answer that tonight, but before
Yeah,
we
I
vote on
think
these
we'll-
policies,
yeah, I
and
think
it's
we'll wanna think
I've got section something .5. My notes aren't that good. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah. No, I do think, I mean, we had discussion about that because
yeah. I mean, that was part of it,
Right.
they're all entwined with each other.
we were well aware that there are employees, because DPI does take a significant amount of time to confirm licensure, who are getting paid without that confirmation, and so we do need, we would need to change that particular provision. Yep.
So, add that to the list.
Okay.
Any other comments on the board rights?
So, can we
Yeah.
have, I mean, is there
Yeah, I think-
language in various policies that are gonna reflect this, I guess is my question.
TJ, I think it is reflected in is it 85?
8,005.
8,005, sorry. Yes, it
Mhm.
does in 8,005 if you look under the section that's titled reporting. It does share it there.
I have to find that because it's not attached to the agenda tonight.
Mhm. And if you'd like, I can just read, it's under 8005 F1. Transaction reports, which shall be provided monthly to the board via the regular meeting consent agenda, shall include licensure information as appropriate for all prospective employees. The report shall indicate whether the individual is licensed or whether the individual's license is pending final verification by the Wisconsin Department of Instruction.
Okay, and it says, can you back up, and it said pending, what's the, I'm sorry, give me the section so I can look at the.
Sure, it's 8005 and it's F1.
Okay, let me just, I've got it pulled up here. Prospective employees.
Mhm.
What I want clarity is that prior to that, clearly, in some sense, prior to that process, people are prospective employees, not employees.
Mhm.
Prior to, and I guess and I don't see clarity in any of these policies around that. I see a lot of places where it's implied. Here they're referred to as, for all prospective employees, this report. So the board is presented with a report, and when we approve the report, then they go from being prospective employees to being employees. That's my understanding. I would like someplace in one of these policies that to be spelled out as it, because, again, it's implied here. The word prospective employee implies that. Maybe I missed it somewhere, but I don't see that anywhere clear. And if you can, if you want to go back through them, Matt, and show me where it's clear, or use
Sure.
an email, or if you can just put language in one of these policies, just.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
I think that it's. Yeah.
Well, I have to figure out where that appropriately goes, I guess, is what I want to really think about. Because, the HR report is more than prospective employees. Many of them are prospective employees. Others are of a different category. So,
Transfers, promotions, changes of
Sure.
status, changes.
Exactly,
of,
exactly.
LTEs, extra duty. I mean, there's a whole lot of
right,
stuff on there.
right. I guess I really would like a chance to think about where that goes in, whether it's under reporting, whether it's somewhere else in terms of 8005, or whether, again, you mentioned 8041, 8042 in terms of assignment. I guess I want to find the best place for it so it makes sense.
I much appreciate that, and
Okay.
and 8200 might be the place for it too, which is there. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a clear idea of where it should go.
Okay.
But I also appreciate you pointing out that this applies to more than simply new hires, but there's a whole series of HR transactions that was the HR transaction report. I think that's what
Exactly.
it's titled. That this applies to, and I look forward to what you read what you come up with.
Okay.
And because again, I don't have a clear idea where, but I do know I want something to at least consider.
And so I just want to make sure I'm clear. We want to have language indicating that, and let's just take an example. All of our new teachers who start in September, sorry, August, most likely would show up on that and help me out if I'm wrong here, on the HR transaction report, probably at the regular board meeting report at the end of either August or September. Would that be?
Probably September.
So that's just another consideration I have to keep in mind, that they're starting, in August. Now, my understanding is all of their contracts say subject to board approval, and that's really what we're talking about here. And maybe that's the language we need to incorporate.
And also acknowledge that employment might predate the approval and things like,
That's what I'm trying to get at.
It ain't simple.
Yeah.
But you're good.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, okay.
That's all I got.
All right, that makes sense.
That's
Thank
all
you.
I got.
Yeah, number 3, thanks for the little heads up on the note you put there. It is awkwardly written, and I also, I'm not sure, are we just trying to tell that the board wants the superintendent to seek out information from staff? And the way we qualified here is troublesome. I would strike and just put all MMSD staff instead of trying to, because in this one we're leaving out all the lot of the custodians, the food service, the carpenters, all there's people there that can help us get with information. So what do you want to do? You noted it, but what are your thoughts on what you wanna do?
It could be eliminated entirely, quite honestly.
I think the intention was to.
I was thinking that if we did anything, just keep the last sentence and say, instruct the superintendent to seek advice and counsel of the MMSD staff whenever it's pertinent, or what the I don't know if it should be there.
It's a weird
but
place
it's
to have
certainly
it.
It's
it's
strange.
like
it's strange.
it's like a recommendation to, hey, don't forget to talk to the staff while you're doing your work, because you might get some good information from them. Well, that makes sense. I mean, any superintendent is going to hopefully will
I
do
think
that as a
it's
standard practice, but if we're
it
trying
really
to say here
obligates
that
us to do
we're
nothing.
praising our staff because they really know a lot of stuff and they're going to help us run a great school district, I'm fine with that. We can put that, I'll sign up for that as a board responsibility and say that. So I don't know what we want.
Additionally, the last sentence, it instructs the superintendent to ask the staff for help when the superintendent thinks it's appropriate. So technically, it's not doing anything because the superintendent is the one making the decision. No offense, Jen, but completely and utterly redundant.
And is that a board responsibility to say, hey, check with your staff?
I don't
think
think
it
it
is.
is.
I think the intention was to strike it before this meeting, and then it just didn't happen. So if everybody's okay with just striking the whole paragraph,
I'd be fine with that. That was the purpose of the note. Yep.
great.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Moving on.
Any other comments on board rates? All right, Nikki, 8252, public relations.
Yes, and that is on the subpoena issue. And my issue is agreed on the Fifth Amendment concern. Staff members shall, meaning they must, testify in court if they're subpoenaed, unless there's just cause for his or her failure to appear. Well, technically that means you're giving up your Fifth Amendment right not to testify in case of incrimination, and I don't know if you wanted to do that.
I think this is we have staff who are subpoenaed a lot, more than you can imagine, in all manner of proceedings.
I know I've had to do it.
Yeah, and sometimes there's just cause for them not to appear. But if a staff member is subpoenaed and it's related to a matter related to employment, they're obligated now on the stand. They could claim their Fifth Amendment rights, but they're obligated to appear and potentially provide records pursuant to that subpoena.
See, I can see you're required to appear and possibly provide documentation, but when it says testify, that's where maybe it's the lawyer in me, but that just.
So would you maybe you're more comfortable with appear?
Yep.
Okay.
It's an attorney thing.
Shall appear in court. Okay.
alarm bells went off.
Okay. All right.
All right,
And it matches the
8254.
last part of it too.
You good?
Yeah.
8254 on gifts.
What is nominal? It says this kind of, is there some kind of definition? Is there?
If you look at ethics opinions from Wisconsin, they mentioned that some $15 might be more than nominal. The federal government, my understanding, we had this discussion in SLT, my understanding is $5. TJ and I discussed this extensively, and there's a fairly common practice at the end of the year to give the teacher a $10 Starbucks gift card, an Apple, whatever. We didn't want to prohibit that practice. More than nominal value, it's not defined, quite honestly. But again, the ethics opinions from Wisconsin mention $15 as a standard.
Thank you.
Is this could we define nominal the way that we choose to?
I wouldn't want to veer from the ethics opinions because they are public employees. So I wouldn't want to veer too much from that. Yeah. And I promise my kids' teachers won't get any more than $10 gift cards.
Just out of curiosity, Matt, when's the $15 standard from? What's the date?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't recall off the top of my
Because
head.
there might be an inflationary factor there too that we need to deal with,
Yeah,
right?
I will look that up.
25 or
When did that
$50,
opinion
you know.
come from? Okay.
Right, I mean, plug it into the inflation calculator.
Sure. Okay.
All right. I think we just had one more. 8,900?
Can I talk to you?
Yep.
Can I go back on the gifts?
Yep.
Because I was just looking and we use the language of. They're of employees, but other places we're using staff. Is there,
Oh, I didn't think of that.
Do you want to join the policy committee?
yeah, I know, this is really getting a little bit more in the weeds than I tend to do. But I was, and I think what got my attention to it was employee of the board, which, is that?
Should we be consistent and just say staff member by
Yeah.
any staff member?
And would you put of the board?
It probably, that was the language from 2004. It's not inappropriate, but I guess for consistency's sake, staff member.
Staff.
Yep. Okay.
District staff member.
And this probably, so would we include, this is human resources, so it doesn't govern the board and the board, any policies with regards to gifts. Board members accepting gifts would be then under the board policy.
Right, that'd be under the
Okay, great.
1,000s. Yep.
So under 15.
I would imagine it, I don't know what this is.
I believe it's under the board ethics policy.
Mhm, yeah,
I
okay.
didn't know where it was.
Okay. 8,900.
Just one question, why was it struck because it's not needed anymore? That's my only question.
We had extensive discussion about it. The current administration feels it's kind of weird, for lack of a better term, that
Well, it is indeed.
to guarantee an interview for an individual who resigned and wants to come back, and not only just guarantee for any one position, but all positions for which they might be applicable. It doesn't seem to ring with our equity policy, and so I tried to figure out what was going on in 2003.
Yeah, that's
No, I think
weird, I think, is a good.
I think I know what was going on.
All right.
Communicated with some former board members who were on the board at that time, and it had to do with both one specific individual, but then also more general kind of practice. It was when Libby Burmaster was state superintendent of public instruction, and administrators were on a fairly regular basis moving back and forth between DPI and MMSD. And this and the leave of absence policy didn't work for them, and especially those who were political appointees and were taking political appointee jobs with Libby. They would not be guaranteed a job at DPI after Libby's time. And so this was in relation, one person in particular was apparently, but then there were 3 or 4 other people who kind of fell into it. One of whom I now recall was through this policy, moved into principalship at one of my son's schools at the time. Came from DPI back to the principalship when Libby left, and it was through this policy. So that was why this came from, is that there was this kind of tram moving back and forth between DPI and MMSD.
Yeah.
And the leave policy and the leave of absence policy didn't work for these administrators. So that's the history.
All right.
Motion to make TJ the historian.
Any other comments on the 8,000s? Yeah, thank you. All right, great. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Thank you, TJ. All in favor?